everybody, it's time to take a look to the troubleshooting part of the ccnp exam. As you know, ccnp consists 3 parts and they are route, switch and Tshirt, and it's time to take a look to the Tshirt now, and the first section gonna be about troubleshooting methods. Troubleshooting is the process of diagnosing a problem and, if possible, resolving it. The troubleshooting process is usually triggered when a person or a monitoring system reports a problem. While the person reporting the problem often gives clues about the symptoms of problem, the troubleshooter, the person who is going to have the problem, has to find the root cause of the problem. Let's take a look how we can approach to a troubleshoot process. The first thing we are gonna do is defining the problem by getting some information. Then we need to analyze it and eliminate some causes. Then we need to propose hypothesis and test it. And finally, we need to solve the problem. Gathering information happens after the problem has been reported. Usually, the problem report does not contain enough information to formulate a good hypothesis without first gathering more information. The second step is analyze. After the gathered information has been analyzed, the troubleshooter compares the symptoms against his knowledge of the system, processes, and the baselines to separate normal behavior from abnormal behavior. The third step is eliminate. By comparing the observed behavior against expected behavior, some of the possible problem causes are eliminated. Then we need to propose hypothesis. After gathering and analyzing information and eliminating the possible causes, one or more potential problem causes remain. The most likely cause is proposed as the hypothetical cause of the problem. Then we need to test the hypothesis. In the fifth step, the hypothesis must be tested to confirm or deny that it is the actual cause of the problem. Now let's take a look to the unstructured Tshirt approach. In this approach, we define the problem, gather information about it, but we don't use analyze and eliminate steps. We directly jump to the proposed hypothesis and test hypothesis, then we are trying to solve the problem. After a very short period of gathering information, taking this approach, the troubleshooter quickly makes a change to see if it solves the problem or not. This technique might be quite effective for experienced troubleshooter most times, but it usually does not yield the same results for the inexperienced troubleshooters. And here are the types of the structured Tshirt approach. We have top-down approach, bottom-up, divide and conquer, follow the path, spot the differences, and move the problem approach. If you use top-down, you start from the application layer of the OSI module and go to bottom. If you use bottom-up, you start from the physical layer of OSI module and you go until the application. If you use divide and conquer, you start from the middle of OSI module, and that's usually the network layer, and you go up or down according to the findings. And we have followed the path approach, as I said. In this method, the troubleshooter here simply takes a trace output and tries to uncover the problems on way to the destination. And we have spot the differences method, as you can see in here. In this method, the correct configuration of the network devices is compared to the problematic configuration with the problems, and the differences are focused on. And lastly, we can use move the problem method. In this strategy of the troubleshooting approach of the move the problem is to observe whether the components physically move and repeat the problem on the transported components. Essentially, the goal of the top-down approach is to find the highest OSI layer that is still working. All devices and processes that work on the layer or layers below are then eliminated from the scope of the troubleshooting. It might be clear that this approach is most effective if the problem is on one of the higher OSI layers. It is also one of the most straightforward troubleshooting approaches because problems reported by users are typically defined as application layer problems, so starting the troubleshooting process at the layer is a natural thing to do. A drawback or impediment to this approach is that you need to have access to the client's application layer software to initiate the troubleshooting process. And if the software is only installed on a small number of machines, your troubleshooting options might be limited. Alright, what we're gonna focus on this top-down approach is, for example, this user reported a problem that he cannot surf on the internet. Alright, if we are using the top-down approach, we need to focus on the application layer of the OSI module first, and we ask to the user that, hey man, what are you using as your browser, for example? Are you using Google Chrome? Or are you using Opera? Let's say that the guy said, hey, I'm using Chrome. And what we're gonna offer to this guy is, hey man, can you try the Opera browser? Okay, the guy tries the Opera browser. Maybe the problem is solved or not. If the problem is solved, there's no problem, right? Life is good. But if the problem is not solved, you go to until the physical layer of the OSI module by starting from the application layer. Okay, you check the application layer, then you need to control the other layers as well. For example, you can control the network layer. You can ask the IP address of this guy. Maybe you need to control the layer 2 and you need to control the data link layer and you need to ask the MAC address of this guy. So you can check the switch configurations or you can check the router configurations and etc. And let's take a look to the bottom-up approach now. Okay, let's say that this guy cannot surf on internet again. And let's say that he opened the trouble ticket to you. Okay, what we're gonna focus on the bottom-up approach is starting from the physical layer. And we need to check until application layer if we couldn't find the solution. Alright, what we're gonna ask this guy first this time is, hey man, can you check your cable that is coming to your PC? Can you check your Ethernet cable? Are the lights of the Ethernet is fine or not? Or is your cable plugged in correctly? Okay, then if the answer is no, we offer this guy, okay, plug your cable correctly into your PC, then you'll be able to join the internet. Alright, if the problem still persists, what we're gonna do is let's checking the data link layer this time. Alright, if the cable is okay, if life is good, but if guy still cannot surf on the internet, what we're gonna focus on this time is OSI layer 3, which is data link layer, and we can ask the MAC address of the user. Okay, we can ask this guy, hey man, what is your MAC address? I'm gonna check the, for example, switch. Alright, if there's not a problem still on the switch definitions, we can check an upper layer, which is network layer, and we can check the router configurations. We can ask the IP address of this guy, and we can check the router interface configurations perhaps. Then we should climb until the application layer of the OSI module. And another troubleshooting method is divide and conquer approach. Let's say that this guy reported that he cannot surf on internet again. In the divide and conquer approach, you start from the layer 3. Okay, you can ask the user, hey man, what's your IP address? Tell me. Okay, you take a look to IP address, and if you find the solution, life is good, there's no problem. But if you cannot find the solution, okay, what is your IP address? For example, this guy said, hey, there's no IP address attached to my Ethernet. I'm taking an IP address like starting with the 169, which is the IP address, which means there's a problem with the DHCP options, perhaps. Alright. If you can find a solution on the network and layer 3, it's okay, but if you cannot find the solution and if the guy is taking the IP address correctly, we need to take a look to the upper layers. But if the guy cannot obtain an IP address correctly, we can check the lower layers. And we have the follow the path approach. In this approach, you are tracing the devices and you are tracing the packets path. For example, let's say that we have an EcoPal server in here, and let's say that this guy cannot reach the Exchange server. So the path that EcoPal using by reaching the Exchange is this path, as you can see, and we need to trace this path by using a simple traceroute or Tshirt command, and we need to check the hops step by step. And we have also compared configuration approach. By comparing configurations, software versions, hardware or other device properties between working and non-working situations and spotting significant differences between them, this approach attempts to resolve the problem by changing the non-operational elements to be consistent with the working ones. The weakness of this method is that it might lead to a working situation without clearly revealing the root cause of the problem. In some cases, you are not sure whether you have implemented a solution or a workaround. The compare configuration approach is not a complete approach. It's, however, a good technique to use undertaking other approaches. One benefit of this approach is that it can easily be used by less experienced troubleshooting staff to at least shed more light on the case. When you have an up-to-date and accessible set of baseline configurations, diagrams and so on, spotting the difference between the current configuration and the baseline might help you solve the problem faster than any other approach. In this approach, devices are simply replaced and it is observed whether the problem continues or not. Alright, and we have this web components approach lastly. And in this method, you change the place of the device and check if this problem is still persists or not. For example, let's say that there's a problem on the monitoring device. The monitoring device cannot surf on the internet. Alright, what we're gonna do in this method is just changing the place of the monitoring PC to here, for example, and use this cable and this port of the switch and checking if the problem is still going or not. Alright guys, we came end of this first session, but what I'm gonna show you is very good tool on internet. When you're gonna join the Tshirt exam, you need to resolve some multiple choice questions. You're gonna face these guys and you're gonna face with a scenario which consists of some tickets. The first one is, okay, we know how a multiple choice question can be asked to us, you know. For example, they can ask something like that. Which one is not a troubleshooting method? For example, top down, bottom up, and blah blah blah. Okay, this is a multiple choice question. And what we're gonna focus in here is the ticket scenario. Cisco is publishing a demo item for this scenario. Okay, well, what I'm gonna do in here is just showing you the Cisco's website by typing Tshirt tutorial. And when you type this, you see that there's a Tshirt demo item page. We open it. So here is the screen that you will face in the actual troubleshooting exam. Alright, that's the actual screen. But this is a demo item surely. You're not gonna face with the same of this topology, but you're gonna face the similar one of this topology. Alright, we have a scenario in here. In the scenario, Tshirt.com has created the test bed network shown in the layer 2 and layer 3 topology exhibits. This network consists of 4 routers on layer 3 switch and 1 layer 2 switch. In the IPv4 layer 3 topology, router 1, 2, 3, 4 and DSW1 are running EIGRP with an AS number of 16. Router 1 is running static routing to access devices outside the Tshirt network and blah 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 blah. In the scenario field, you take an overview look to the topology. Okay, and we have also layer 2 topology. They're gonna share this guy with you too, which consists of the layer 2 connections and the VLAN definitions and something like that. For example, we have an DSW switch and we have an ASW switch, which means access switch W1 and distribution switch 1. Okay, as we can see in here, they are connected to each other from the 19th port, and we have client 1 and client 2, and they are connected to the ASW1 and they are using VLAN 10. Alright, something like that. And we have also IPv4 layer 3 topology, and in here, as you can see that we are seeing the routers connected to each other, and we can check the IP addresses of the interfaces in here as well. Alright, that's the layer 3 topology. So what you're gonna do in the exam is you need to solve these tickets. As you can see that we have 4 tickets in here, and each ticket consists of a few questions. Let's start with the ticket 1. And please keep in mind that in the Tshirt exam, you are not gonna make any configuration, guys. You will just define the problem and you'll just offer a hypothesis about it, how to solve the problem. Alright, for example, there's a example question in here and which saying that the implementation group has been using the test bed to do a POC that requires both client 1 and client 2 access the web server at blah blah blah. After several changes, the interface status, network addressing, routing shams and layer 2 connectivity, a trouble ticket has been opened indicating that client 1 cannot ping the IP address. As you can see, use IOS commands to isolate the cause of this fault and answer the following questions. On which device is the fault condition located? Or you are opening the topologies in here and you are checking the devices step by step. For example, if you want to control the router 4, you open it, enable, and you can check the show run. You can ping some IP addresses. You can make some trace routes and something like that. Okay, when you find where the problem is about the question, you choose your answer and click to the next question button. And this time it's asking that almost the same thing, but it's saying that as the fault condition is related to the which technology. You need to also define the technology which the fault condition is related to. For example, let's say that you found that the problem is about the static reading. In the next question, you offer a hypothesis about how to solve the fault condition. For example, let's say that we need to write an IP route, something like that. Alright, when you finish a ticket, you get a notice. You have completed the current ticket, continue to work on remaining tickets. But in this demo item, you see something like that too. You have answered 1 out of 4 questions for this ticket correctly. Note, this information is only presented in this demo item, so you're not gonna see something like that in the exam. Okay, when you close it, you can now go ahead with the ticket 2. And you're gonna solve these tickets too, and that's it. Alright guys, what I need to say you is just focus on how you can find the problems and how you can solve this. I just wanted to show you what kind of a exam you'll face with the real life, and that's cool. That's a really cool stuff by Cisco. Alright. So we are coming to the end of this session, and thanks for viewing.